Yeah, all right. Okay, it works. Okay, hello everyone. Hope you're having fun and enjoying the conference so far. Sorry because we're late. Uh, it seems that artificial intelligence may have the potential to solve many of the most pressing problems societies around the world face. What AI technologies can do for society and how they can be used for public good. We have three very interesting speakers here participating in the panel discussion called AI for Good. You have already met Tarry, who gave a keynote this morning. Hope you enjoyed it. Alice comes from London and works for an organization called AI for Good at a position of managing director. Before that, she spent a significant time working with British government on AI policy-related issues and quite some time working with social enterprises, mostly in the UK. And the third participant, Peter Morgan, he's a consultant and the founder of Deep Learning Partnership that serves clients across many different domains, but focused on healthcare. So without further ado, we will jump into discussion because we don't have much time left. And one kind reminder, you can use Slido for asking questions. Last few minutes will be dedicated for that. So the first question for all of you. So AI for Good has become some sort of a hot buzzword. So what is AI for Good from your perspective? How would you explain it and define it?
Okay, great. You guys can hear me. I think the last 2 years, my experience with AI for Good is, focusing on what's real, what's not. So I think I don't know if some of you may have seen, attended my talk in the morning. The only way to demonstrate and provide value is by actually, creating solutions that work in communities or in society. I didn't get much time to talk about it because I realized I ran over my 30 minutes. I always do. I tell people, just pull me off stage because there's so much to tell. I didn't talk about climate AI, where we're actually starting a bunch of projects and trying to understand, the Amazonian fires. So we just pulled in a researcher who used to work with Professor Yoshua Bengio. I'm sure you heard of that name. It's one of those top 3 Turing laureate now, I guess, together with Professor Hinton and Jan LeCun. That's kind of something where we think we really need to kind of demonstrate through data and through demonstrable solutions that climate is changing dramatically. How do you kind of create awareness and try to show to the community, but also at the policy, the state level, that it is going to have adverse effect on our lives. Through Policy AI, there's another initiative. We're looking at a couple of things. I was talking to someone outside. There are a lot of sort of social problems. There's one, we're kickstarting a project in France that's about, it's not, a lot of solutions are not popular because they either, you don't have too much information about these. So the problem that we're trying to solve is to understand, semantic context is always a problem. There's a lot of women are, even in modern societies, especially when we have the demographic kind of regurgitation happening in European societies where people from all faith and different backgrounds come and settle, is abuse in your homes, and women are get killed due to domestic abuse as well. There's a lot, but you don't hear about it because there's a lot of fancy news to talk on the news. So we're trying to kickstart a project with. I heard from my sales director in France that we've got L'Oreal on board and SAP as well, a technology company. So there's a lot you can do. But again, I mean, we're just scratching the surface. I've heard there are other peers in the industry who have more experience. I'm not a policy expert. We just try to see if we can take a look at data and try to solve it. So those are the kind of things we're doing as well. But we just try to keep it low-key until we do something demonstrable with data and are able to show to policy leaders that, guys, well, we have something which actually works, and it's not just sitting in hundreds of panel talks, which also happens, is equally important. But I guess demonstration is where you kind of differentiate from, being the doers than the talkers, I guess.
Thank you, Tarry. I agree about the doers. We are also doers. So as you know, guys, like AI is a very powerful technology and it's becoming like more and more ubiquitous. And I think the decisions that we make today about our future with AI are going to shape the future. And not only for us, but for next generation, for our planet's future. And I think it's really important that we leverage this powerful technology for social impact and for humanitarian causes, and trying to solve like some of the toughest like problems facing humanity today. So this is exactly what my company does. We basically, for us, like AI for Good is not just like using the tool. It's not just about the technology, because we think technology is never like a magic bullet. So for us, it's mostly about building like holistic solutions that include, scalability, sustainability, making sure they're ethical, making sure they're like, powered obviously by like some latest technologies, but also like when it's needed, when it's necessary, because otherwise like it's just a gimmick. What is AI for Good for me personally? I think it's about empowering individuals. So I think what is happening right now in the industry, and we see it a lot, how like big companies, big monopolies are being created because they they have access to data, they can like leverage it for different, purposes. Sometimes it's making profit, sometimes it's like, advertising and promotion some products to us, to individuals, which is great. But what about us? Like, how can we get empowered and like take back control and, for our life? How can we make it better using these tools? So for me, it's mostly about, giving this powerful tool back to people. So we are actually focusing on end users a lot in our day-to-day activities and in our products. And this is what AI for Good is for me.
Yeah, I think AI for Good is using AI for the right purpose. Basically, we can use AI is a very powerful tool, right? We can use it for good or selfish reasons. So that's the first thing. And then the second is making sure it's kind of safe. And, even though we may be trying to use it for good purposes, we actually, don't make huge mistakes with it or add bias in there, which we've had a lot of talks about that. Sort of inadvertently, so it's a very powerful tool, so we just have to be a little bit careful, that we check, all our assumptions going into using it.
Yeah. And out of all potential, like in existing, like uses of AI for public good, what would be your, like, the most interesting one in your opinion, and why? Like which big public problems?
I would say my favorite uses of AI so far, obviously like climate change, but mostly about not just like, creating another piece of research that kind of proves that climate change exists, because I think we kind of know it already. It's mostly about, preventing some stuff. So for instance, like detecting like small fires using satellite imagery. For me, it's kind of like the most useful case. Also like anything to do with like energy efficiency, wastage management. So like anything to do with circular economy and how do we, overproduce a lot of stuff. So I don't know if you know, guys, but like companies like sometimes even like burn stuff because they overproduce. I'm not talking about food, even like food is insane. So anything to do with that, and obviously like more kind of like personalized and user solutions. So anything to do with chatbot technology. I think we can, educate people a lot about, saving money and like directing them to, services that can help in the case of poverty. So for me, this kind of solutions are even more appealing because I see the real impact. So for me, it's really important when I work on a problem.
Yeah, so a couple of programs I've been involved in personally with my company is healthcare and climate change. So those are kind of close to my heart, which is why I spend time doing them. So, we're all concerned about health, our own health, right? Maybe for selfish reasons, but it'd be nice to for us to all live longer, healthier lives, right? I don't think anyone on the planet would dispute that. I think we're all in agreement. So that's one thing. So that's kind of how you know it's a good thing, right? If we're all in agreement. And then climate change, I take very seriously. I've been following it for probably 15 years. And yeah, I remember 15 years ago being a little bit optimistic that, awareness is there. And so we'll start to do something about it. But then, the optimism has faded over the years to now. I'm just, this is so ridiculous. Human nature, we're like lemmings. We'll just run off the cliff and then worry about it when we hit the bottom. So, AI should definitely be used for, helping us combat climate change. But first of all, it takes the will. The will has to change. So that's really nothing to do with AI, right? It's education. And then the troubling thing is, we had the Paris Accord where every country decided, yes, climate change is real, and it was very optimistic at that point, but then the US decided to say it's not real and come out, just stuff like that. Your heart just thinks, it's like, it's so obvious, and yet, this other side of human nature is like, no, greed kicks in. It's like, we just want to make money until the planet doesn't exist anymore. And then you just go, wait, how stupid, how crazy can you be, right? If there's no planet and you have all the money, how stupid is that? So, but yeah, so that's getting kind of political. But yeah, AI and the very powerful tools can certainly be used for the data analysis and in both healthcare, genomics, help us to live longer, healthier lives, and in climate change to analyze, a lot of data from a lot of sensors that are, placed around the planet.
So I generally agree with Alice and Peter. I think, and particularly what you said. So it would be kind of, ridiculous for us to believe that, take technology and, then you solve these social problems. It's impossible because many of these need to translate back to policy level, and motivations are generally very capitalistic, no matter how we try to, view societies. There is, as I'm kind of shared in the morning, there is this pro and anti way of, over exaggerated use of data to churn and mine and monetize. And there is a protectionist view, supposedly. I'm from Europe, so I cannot, I do kind of agree with that policy, although it does hinder the progress in using technology because at one point, you have, in other region of the world, you have unabashed use of technology to experiment first and then figure out and kind of, stuff like what companies like, commercial companies do. So I think there's a lot of potential for bad. Just as an example, I was traveling with my son in Israel, and he's, trying to get my kids into AI and machine learning, and they hate it because all they see is me. When I'm sitting in my office, home office, and conference calls, or either if I'm not coding, then I'm talking here or to my colleagues. So he wants to be a historian. So when I was in Israel, a good friend of mine in Tel Aviv, his dad used to be a historian. He used to be advising the government on, because as you know, that country is definitely like, I guess, the Balkan of that region, as we are right now sitting here. The original version. But, so you need to understand threat from a very different perspective. Now, what happens is, as I went to Golan Heights and a bunch of other places, we were traveling across the country. There were many technological solutions that, were, defense mechanism, you could put it this way. But the question is, how do you kind of, remove biases from those tools that are, supposed to protect citizens of your own country? So that, I guess, technology is super important, but I guess the human element in taking that conscious choice and understanding, well, what is it? Why do we exist in this part of, Middle East region? And how is coexistence, so important for our, longevity and existence of our societies? So I think it is a hard problem to solve. But I'm an optimist. I think if you just, and I've hated history as well because, there's a lot of repeat. So there's, essentially like 200 years, 300 years, 200 years ago in 1815, around that time. So there was this huge thing going on climate and lots of, in Europe and in the Netherlands region, a bunch of other places, extreme heat waves, fires and all that stuff. So essentially, it almost feels like the human factor tends to kind of overrule and ignore that. And then you have, we've been through wars. I would like to see that we create a society, we are super race, essentially. We are ourselves in control of making changes. I think collectively it's possible. We don't need to plan to sort of do terraforming on Mars. I think we can really solve a problem where, you don't have to create a different society, but I do believe that there should be some solution. But I digress. My apologies for that. I think what I'm trying to say is that it is a difficult problem, but still, I'm putting significant amount of effort, my own effort. So I have a couple, close to 1,000 hours allocated, just to kind of go there and meet and talk to policy level people. I don't know how much time it's going to take for us to kind of keep seeing the proper use of AI. I don't know what we can do to try to kind of bring awareness that there is an improper use, whether it's in military or other regions where there's a lot of investments moving into AI-driven sort of technologies. So yeah, I'm kind of scared as well. So we try to just focus on trying to look at community problems and solve these, and hopefully the leaders can kind of manage the geopolitical sort of kind of rather overheated climate that we are living in today. So it's a pretty complicated topic, if you ask me.
Yeah, Alice, because since you're part of TechRefugees and international impact-driven organization trying to use technology to help displaced population and refugees, so can you share some of the uses of AI for that cause? Maybe highlighting some projects or...
So yes, I've seen so far I don't know, multiple uses of AI in different areas. And TechRefugees is the organization that I supported previously. Now I'm kind of volunteering for them in my free time, which is about bringing tech community and hacking to build solutions for refugees. The interesting uses of AI there would be to start with just predicting new waves of migration. So I don't know if you guys know, but a lot more new kind of waves of refugees are connected to, again, climate change, and it's going to be, pretty much nonstop in the next, I don't know, century or so. So it's going to be less from the conflict and more from climate issues. And obviously, you can use a lot of data and a lot of variables to factor, to basically predict when is the next wave coming and where is it going to be located and how to prepare, how to plan for it. So this is number one use, which I think is very, very important. Another one is obviously anything to do with mental health. So we don't talk about it a lot, but especially when you, work with these people. So as part of TechRefugees, I can say we would always include them in the solution, ideation process, because it's really important that we understand their needs directly from them rather than listening to the governments or charities. And when you speak to them directly and when you understand, okay, they have been through, some settlement process now. So after their, heroic journey, going from one country to another, they've been resettled in a new country. They now understand the rules of the game a little bit. So the next big challenge for them, and actually it's bigger than anything else, is mental health. So how do you recover from that stress? How do you recover from that experience? And all of it is about, making sure there's someone they can communicate, they can, talk about this issue. So there are lots of again, chatbots in this area. The one that was particularly interesting is called Karim. It was trialed in a refugee camp in Amman. And the funny results that it produced was like 50% of people, so like the opinion was very divided among refugees. So 50% of refugees would say, oh, this is amazing. I felt like so much better because it wasn't a human kind of like assessing me. So I could openly speak about, you know, any issue or any concern that I have. So because it's non-judgmental, it's a bot, right? You can share a lot more. Without expecting like any judgment on the other side. So it was very, very useful for them in that sense. The other half would be like, oh no, it's completely useless. It's just a bot. It's not going to help me. It's not empathetic. So I think the next kind of wave of chatbots in this area should be way more, not just advanced in terms of like how it processes the language and understands it and replies back, but also about developing some empathy and understanding of the context and like sentiment around the issues that refugees are experiencing. Another thing that is particularly interesting is anything to do with education, because I actually like went to a camp in Cali like a couple of years ago, and we spent a day in the school. And for me, the crazy experience, to be honest, was all about, you know, how do you engage kids from a refugee community into education? Because first of all, they're all coming from different levels, right? So some of them didn't have any education to start with. Some of them did have, but it was kind of like a big gap. You know, during their journey, obviously they didn't do much. And now also being like stressed and like being around their parents in this, you know, areas where, you know, there's a big congregation of like refugees and they don't feel safe. Everything they care about is entertaining themselves. So it's like, give me a game, give me something, like, let's play some game, let's like, you know, paint something. And you're like, how about studying something? So like even bringing their attention back to, you know, studying is really, really hard. So developing tailored approaches, like more personalized kind of education ways for these kids, I think would be very, very important in the next, in the coming years.
Thanks. Yeah, before the discussion, we talked about AI safety. So like maybe you can share some of your like thoughts and experiences on that, especially in regards to AI for good, like some of the challenges where people are trying to build something, what do they need to think about, like what can go wrong, etc.
Okay, so I sort of have an AI safety group which I started on Facebook, which is the largest one in the world, 2,500 members. So every day I get to moderate this discussion on AI safety, and I get to sort of see all points of view from all over the world. And it is quite funny. I mean, it started off maybe when I started it 4 years ago, just everyone was, alarm was the most common reaction, right? Oh my God, AI is going to kill us all, blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of calmed down a little bit when we see the limitations of AI, right? And how broken it is, really, to be honest. Even if what we have now, what we call AI is actually AI, right? It's narrow, it's not general. It's artificial neural networks. It's not real neural networks. It's not how the brain works. So, I mean, these companies like Google, Facebook have made a lot of money out of tuning their search algorithms and social media. Well, we all know about Facebook. What they did, they kind of misused AI, maybe, selling data, spying on us, etc., to all in the aim of making profit, right? So today, AI safety really concerns, these deep learning algorithms, which I wouldn't consider AI at all. They're just matrix multiplication when it boils down to it. But that's the problem, right? We're using this tool, which a lot of people don't understand what it actually is under the hood, right? And expecting it to do more stuff than it can do, or stupid stuff that it definitely cannot do. So really it's about understanding, what we're using, the tools we're using, whether it's, TensorFlow or PyTorch, which, that's what people call AI, and it's not AI at all. It's just this tool that does matrix multiplication really fast if you get the right hardware like GPUs. And also introducing bias by, biased data sets, which we have around. It's no one's fault, really. It's just the data we've captured, but being very careful to actually understand the assumptions, that went into gathering that data. Was it just, data gathered in Silicon Valley, where it'd be mostly white, rich males? Is that actually representative of the rest of the world? Well, clearly not. Right? That's a few hundred, maybe 1 million people or something. So just really common sense, no-brainer stuff like that is kind of where you start with AI safety, bias. And then, you can get as sophisticated as you want with it. I mean, I'm giving a talk tomorrow on AGI, which is general intelligence, and I'm sort of saying, what we have now will never get us there. It's just, it's narrow. It does visual. It does image classification, and it does not much more, to be honest. It classifies data, but that's, there's a lot more to intelligence than that. If that's all we did, life would be it wouldn't be very rich. We have emotions, we have emotional intelligence, we have social intelligence. We're aware that there's a hierarchical structure. We need governance. Yeah. So, I mean, I won't go into it too much, but, intelligence is more than what we have today, but that's not, that's not trying to, avoid the question. So the question's applying to what we have today. And I think it just requires careful analysis of the data sets that we're given to start with. And then understanding the actual tool, TensorFlow, the algorithms behind it, RNNs, LSTMs, all the good stuff, GANs, et cetera, and really understanding that and having people who not just are really good at computer science and the tools, but actually can understand a little bit more about the impact that they have on society. And that's where you might have a data scientist, a senior data scientist who has, run a few experiments, has been in the field a while, maybe is a little more mature in their outlook on life, and not just trying to build the next app, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks. Yeah, we have 5 minutes left, so, before giving microphone to the audience, maybe I don't know if anyone is interested in starting a project of this sort, what would be your recommendation to them? I don't know, who should they partner with? Maybe where can they search for some funding, or what should they have in mind? Some sort of a very short recommendation to people who are maybe interested in that.
Depending on where you are in your AI journey, learn as much as you can, and then get a team around you. No one person can do everything. A PhD in computer science, that's the start, but you're going to need a lot more as well. You're going to need ethical people. I went to a talk before this where they had 8 people in the data science team, from ethicists to data scientists to data engineers to UX, UI developers, for the interface with the human, which is what we're really doing, is providing nice tools for us to use. And that we understand. And so, you start maybe by understanding a little bit about data science and AI and machine learning, and then gathering a team, and taking it from there, and then trying to convince a venture capitalist to invest in you. And that's your job.
So for us, every process of building a product in the AI for Good area starts with the problem. So we don't go, from thinking about the solution first and then attaching a problem to it, which some people do a lot. We actually start with the, person who suffers from this problem the most, and, centering everything around this person. So you basically trying to understand the needs of this person by, first of all, putting yourself on the equal level. So these are not, people that are dependent in any way on you or on the government or on charities help. These are people that are entitled to the same kind of social care and benefits, similarly to you. So think about them as your relative or your, close friend. Try to emphasize, try to understand what do they actually need, what is their day-to-day experience, like how can you improve it, and like start small. Don't think about the grand problem that you're gonna like solve the poverty tomorrow, or like solve, I don't know, gender equality issues. Like it's impossible. Start very small, step by step we can achieve it. And actually small, like solutions that are targeting the small kind of like step change are way more useful in the end, like impact wise. Like if you think about it, it's actually building together like this ecosystem where everyone contributes and every small company is doing, a small change, but then together we're kind of like solving a problem. So this is what really important. Another thing talking about the safety here is like, make sure that people that are working on creating the solutions, first of all, it's a diverse group of people, so it shouldn't be just data scientists. I'm sorry, I love data scientists, but sometimes they need some push towards look at this angle, look at that angle. You know like a lot about the issues with solutions that already exist that are biased, because data scientists just don't think about like women, for instance, or black people, or some other like ethnic minorities, for instance, or they don't know about things like, I don't know, that we as women have like periods sometimes, right? So Apple device that tracks your health doesn't help you with like tracking your period, which is bizarre. So like, this type of stuff happens every day, and because we lack this diversity in our, solution making or decision making, which is very, very important. So include as much diverse group of people in your process. And then another thing is obviously like make sure that you care not only about the end user, not only about the customer of your solution, but also about your employees. So make sure that because in data science you actually do a lot of stuff which is preparing data, right? So labeling data, and data can be very toxic. For instance, one of our products called Rainbow, which is about helping those that are at risk of domestic violence and domestic abuse. So like, even going through like text messages that we receive from victims can be very, very damaging to your health, because like just looking at the stories that their everyday experience is like massively traumatic. So you need to put some practices in place in terms of how do you safeguard, how do you protect your employees. If they need to do this data labeling, make sure that first of all, they don't have mental health issues already. And secondly, obviously, like make sure that they're detached from the issue. Make sure that you explain to them, that you guide them through this journey, that, it's nothing to do with you. We need to help these people. We need to, take this serious, but at the same time, not to internalize the context of the problem. So it's really important as well. And then finally, when you build solutions in the AI for good sector, I think it's really important to think about the long-term vision, the sustainability. Coming somewhere like in a developing area, right? So I don't know, in India, or for instance, we work a lot in South Africa as well. And like building a small short-term intervention for 3 months just to test something doesn't work. Because what happens after this 3 months? You will leave. People will get dependent on your solution in a way, right? And you leave them. How it's going to affect their life? Like it may actually like damage it in a pretty bad way. So always think long term. Like when you bring partners, when you like try to partner with like governments or international philanthropic organizations or international development organizations, make sure they're committed, as well as you are, to deliver a long-term sustainable impact. If there's no such thing, don't even try, because it's not good for the people. In the end of the day, they're not gonna like be happy after like you leave in 3 months, right? So just think about that.
I realize there's not much time left. I think they've said all the right things. I guess, I'm actually really grateful that you guys stayed. I know it's lunchtime. So do you want to do Q&A and get, because I love engagement. That's where we learn, Yeah. Sharing is great, but I want to learn from you guys as well. So happy to answer questions if you have.
Yeah, do we have any questions?
Don't need to be shy. Yeah, there. Let's get started.
Some examples of battling climate change with AI. So some projects or something exact. What can you tell us about that?
So what we're trying to do with the climate AI, there are two things we're doing. So one is we call it a pet AI or it's more petrophysics. So where that is typically kind of focused on helping oil and gas companies. So I'll be talking about with the government of Oman next month. So there we are just looking at, what is the best way to optimize and find through satellite imagery, where you can do what kind of sort of drilling. There are many other methods people have been using for like 30, 40 years, So that is one, what we're trying to do. The other with the climate AI, well, the forest deforestation and forest fires in Amazon, we're trying to use GANs and a bunch of other generative models to start creating kind of realistic models of how Earth or that region would look like in 2030. So creating realistic models, so that'll require using tools like Geomancer, which is for GIS services. So we want to bring awareness in a way that it feels realistic. Humans generally are not, so when you look at these apocalyptic and cataclysmic kind of events, whether it's your personal issue, you want to avoid sort of, all this, harming information because you just want to avoid that you're being abused. Earth is, in a way, also a way we just kind of tend to think that it's kind of in the future. It's not close to me. So we want to bring awareness in a very graphic way to show what devastation it will lead to if we continue. So that is, and we'll use a bunch of tools. So there have been many tools. I can talk about it offline with you. And so we're kind of collecting that information and kind of create sort of, first obviously research through satellite imagery, and then trying to also learn those sort of experiences into, smaller regions. Like in Netherlands, there's also small kind of, you could call it kind of like an epidemic starting with little fires in the region where I live. And today it's not huge, so we could kind of also say, how does that work when we have enough data set trained for those models on a much larger surface area like the Amazons, and then try to transport it into other, maybe more societies. As I mentioned, 1815s to 1819, it was pretty bad. People forget. We also forget. We forget pain, and then we also want to defer disaster by just not looking at it. So there's technology we want to use to kind of bring awareness in that way. So we do research. We're going to publish research and put that stuff on GitHub as well in the next couple of months. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you.
I can just quickly add as well. We have a community. We run a community. It's called AI for Good, and we run meetups. And one of the projects there, which we are trying to solve still, and it's kind of like helping a university somewhere in the States, which is working with NASA. And basically the issue there is like detecting methane leaking areas in permafrost. So the problem like seems to be very, very hard because the imagery, the satellite imagery available today is too blurry and not good enough to detect like this small bubbles on the layer of permafrost that has been frozen for like, I don't know, centuries. And now it's like kind of like you can see the bubbles, but they're too small. And all the imagery is like super blurry because there's cloud passing by or something like that. So it's really hard to distinguish. So in a lot of cases like this, as we learned from our friends like in polar science expeditions and something like that, is about going actually to these areas and taking samples, literally using like drone technology or something, or like even your own camera, because it's really, really hard to do it using basic satellite imagery, which is interesting, I guess, in that sense, because it's not that easy as you think.
Hi, my name is Alex. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your experience. I have a question. Some of you touched food industry, which I think is one of the main sources of waste and probably also environmental changes. Are you aware of any projects or techniques or field research that applies data science to avoid food overproduction and things like that?
Do you know any?
There's a startup in UK. Just if you just search UK startup, so they're looking at the garbage cans, starting with its. I think Yeah, something, yeah. It was a guy who left consulting, which is good. And no offense, Peter. But, kind of, he started with this. So basically just looking at, putting cameras into garbage bins and then looking at the amount and calculating the amount of food also wasted. It's all math. So that's pretty cool. The other thing is I would really encourage all of you guys, if you have thoughts, I'm sure you're not asking, it could be all kinds of reasons. Searching actually on GitHub, you will find a lot of half-baked solutions people have done. A lot of people, when they do their dissertation, PhD, they tend to do a lot of projects. There's many, so not just combating waste, which is like a post-event, but also looking at in agriculture. I know another researcher in Colombia, so it's interesting, or Indian origin, but moved to Colombia. He's created an app looking at the, in banana leaves and banana themselves, all kinds of disease that happens. So you're already kind of preventing food waste when it starts.
Yeah.
So I can connect you with those people there. We follow each other's work as well.
This is very interesting, and one of the things I'm wondering if there's anybody doing it already. It's really avoiding the overproduction. So for instance, to give you an example, a lot of actually all of the supermarket chains spend a lot of millions building very sophisticated pricing model. The only reason is to maximize profit, is not to reduce waste, really. Unless waste becomes the problem to solve, to maximize profit. So my thinking is even just trying to fix that, the pricing policies, which of course is complex because you can't impose that unless policymakers wake up and say, okay, we must impose reduction of waste from a supermarket. Like now they are tackling plastic, right? They're imposing packaging restrictions and things like that. So I was wondering, what can we do with data that is available already and it's just used for different purposes completely?
There are many community projects in Europe, even in countries like India, where you're looking at the hotels, for example. They should have some kind of an optimization, and most of the hotels do. For example, the ones which are global chains like Hyatt, Radisson, and all these people, they're doing some form of it. I'm not sure in how much machine learning you can do, but obviously, that's more like a sort of fulfillment and stock and those kind of sort of principles. So overstocked, so I don't know, like those bananas, making a prediction, not just looking at a banana which is spoiled. The spoiled is gone. You just have to sort of destroy it, unfortunately. But the ones that are ripe against riper, against ripest, and then how do you shift them? So while they are on the shelf moving into customers, there's a lot of intelligence we lack. So I agree with you. Optimization is a huge sort of neglected field. Maximization we've seen. We tried to solve humanity's problem by providing excess. If you read the book, keep forgetting the name of the Israeli, Homo sapien and Homo Deus, he kind of sort of describes it interestingly, how, fish farming, we've created all kinds of ways to create overcapacity, but it's leading to all kinds of problems. Look at the obesity in young people. I mean, it's horrible. So all these companies like McDonald's, no offense, but I mean, they should either cease to exist or try to change their, the food processing industry is driven by supplying those sort of, garbage actually through these companies. So I would say, stop at a human level and, do it, because you cannot get in front of those money men and say, I have an optimization problem I can help you solve. But I think there are some, having said that.
Unless you prove that they're going to make more money.
Yeah. Optimization is what actually algorithms do. So essentially, if you can provide that, I'm sure, saving money, there are people looking at it as well.
Thank you.
Can I add just, I'm talking a lot to companies in the UK. One good use case to look at is Ocado. Ocado is optimizing for everything, and I know that in fact that they're now trying to build like a consortium of companies to look exactly at this problem, so like food waste, and they're already, like for themselves, they already optimized a lot of stuff, so they don't overstock. They use a lot of prediction like models and to stock their like warehouses and stuff stuff like that. But obviously, like, how do you share this intelligence with the sector and make sure there's like a holistic approach? Another thing that I discovered recently, so we basically run this school program. It's AI education for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. It's called Future Makers. So we ran a workshop in Reading in the UK like recently, and one group of students came up with a really funny, like, cool solution, I would say, that is looking at, restaurant business. So they were like creating, this idea of like, how do we put, sensors and cameras at, bins in a restaurant. So it's kind of like measuring how much do you waste every day. And at the end of the day, it kind of like sends a score to this website. So instead of going to TripAdvisor as a customer, you would go to this website and you see how much this restaurant would waste, like, this month, given that, right now they're already wasting a lot of food. And you basically just make your decision whether you want to go to this restaurant or not. So it's kind of like incentivizing like customers' behavior. A very interesting solution, I think. Hopefully it will one time become real.
If there's no questions, if there are no questions, I mean, it's lunchtime, so I guess we should go and eat. Thank you for sharing your